Hello, it's Brad Laurie, or BlockchainBrad, and today we're speaking once again with OneLedger. We have two core members of the team with me to explain their recent movements and developments. Firstly, we have Aly. He is the Director of Product. Aly, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Brad.
Always a pleasure, mate. And we also have Paven. He is the software architect for OneLedger, and he's going to provide another insight, another angle in relaying more about what OneLedger are doing. So thanks, Pav, for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
You're welcome, mate. Now let's explore the depths of what you've been doing lately. Aly, we've spoken many times before about the tech aspects, but let's start with the business side of things with the slogan. OneLedger states that they are the blockchain for business. Let's just recap why, especially with the cross-chain element that you've built in.
Yeah, so basically what we're trying to do is cater to businesses by creating an enterprise SDK, having connectivity between centralized and decentralized networks, whether that's through connectivity at a database level, connecting it directly into the blockchain, having having APIs that are set up that connect directly into our blockchain. That way, it makes easier accessibility for enterprise systems to have data coming in and out of the blockchain.
Right. Okay. So obviously business is a key sort of aspect of current blockchains now trying to merge with mainstream business. Now, as I said before, that cross-chain element, how you bring together different aspects of the blockchain with enterprise, how's all that going in terms of feedback from both blockchains and from enterprise sectors?
So, I mean, from an enterprise perspective, I think that it's a crucial aspect of their business to actually solve interoperability. Now, I'm saying that because we've had a lot of feedback with regards to companies that are doing POCs, and they're failing at the aspects where they don't have an interoperability layer, so they can't get past the POC into production. And the reason being is a lot of aspects they're implementing things like Hyperledger, and Hyperledger has this key component where tokenization is not available, and asset trading amongst blockchains. So imagine you have a blockchain on one bank and another blockchain, another bank. They're both managing lending assets, for instance. Those lending assets need to move from one blockchain to another because the bank is either buying the loans or they're trading the loans in some other aspect. Now, those assets cannot shift from one bank to another because if they're built on Hyperledger, because the asset just doesn't exist, the digital asset doesn't exist.
Right.
So that's what we're seeing. And so when they come across that problem, it's two things. One is Hyperledger has an issue with the fact that the asset is not contained there. And the second issue is how do we get it off of one blockchain network onto another?
Exactly. And what's really interesting about OneLedger is that when we're talking about the bridge, as you call it also, it's not just bridging business with blockchain, but it's bridging the permissioned and the public permissionless systems, because fundamentally that's where the real value of tokenized assets and digital assets lies. So do you want to talk to us a bit more about the permissionless aspects, how you're focusing on really building out the public access to the benefits of blockchain?
So I'll give it to Paven on that one here.
So essentially, here's the thing, right? So enterprises generally, when they operate at a closed loop and a closed scale. So they want to have a very restricted access to their environment totally. At the same time, there's a part of it for some enterprises, I would say, which demands, for example, a payment from both Ethereum and Bitcoin, for example, for some of their services. And for that, they can't build their own services as such. So what we do in OneLedger is, so we are trying to build that linking layer. So which means that syncing with the needs of enterprise at this end, syncing up with their APIs or some stuff like that, the integration touch points at this side, and the Lynx Engine that we developed at this side, so that connecting them seamlessly and making sure that the main aspects like transaction finality, or just making sure that we get the transaction out in a safe, secure, and reliable way.
Right. So and Pav, clearly the benefits also of OneLedger is opening up those databases. Essentially, that's what those closed systems are. You're bringing that to the masses, essentially, by making this open source, by making this interoperability and connectivity possible with these permission systems. So for example, we talk about Ethereum. Many people don't know there is a private system also built into Ethereum, that permission component that's very attractive to enterprises because of security. But OneLedger, you're specifically bringing that to the fore in the sense of trying to interlink private systems with public systems. Is that right?
Right. So that's one aspect of it for sure. I wouldn't say that's the whole thing that we're doing, but we have that one aspect where we want to make sure that there is a proper connectivity between private and public networks. That's all. So when I say private, the permissioned ones, they're going to have their own restrictions, and then at the same time, the Lynx Engine, what we're developing, is giving access. So essentially, once we develop the connectivity with Bitcoin and Ethereum, we're gonna open source it so that everyone, I mean, it's already open source essentially, just that we are going to release it to public so that people can write their own custom blockchain solutions. We are coming up with an interface design which suits a lot of blockchains as such. In that direction, we are actually doing some research as well, trying to figure out what that interface looks like in terms of making it a little bit more generalized and stuff like that.
Right, and it's exciting because right now the buzzword is interoperability, quite genuinely. We see other systems with overlay systems that interconnect blockchains. You're certainly in that mix of trying to create a web, or be that interconnected glue that binds them all together. So let's explore that a little bit more. Now, your protocol itself, it's quite robust. You've been spending quite a long time on that. Do you want to talk to us a bit more about the depths of the protocol, the quality of this protocol?
Yeah. So essentially, this is where I'm going to get in. Okay. So we wanted to do a load testing to start off with, just to see how that proceeds for us. I mean, how much of a load can we handle? How quality of a load can we handle? Because when we say interoperability, we have a big responsibility out there to protect the assets of not just us as a company, but assets of other blockchains as well. So in that direction, we started with a load test. And then when we started it, we realized there were some pitfalls, there were some design flaws and stuff like that. So that's when we have actually, a couple of months ago, we sat down together. We have finalized all those. We have noted down and jotted down all the list of those things. We have started working on them. And then we have actually revamped a lot of our code base right now that I have the load testing results ready. And the other reason why we did that was for the developer, it makes easy for developers right now to actually write their own Dapps on top of OneLedger better than any time before. So what the effort that we did is giving us fruits now. So we are ready for, we are like completely, we have a lot of metrics around that direction for enterprises as well for in terms of load testing. So we've got some TPS numbers working on. So essentially, for the last 2 to 3 months, the effort that we made is like coming up, shaping up in a beautiful way that's paving up to our mainnet release.
So when we spoke last time, Brad, we were talking with regards to how, slowing down some of the development progress to speed up later on. And I think we've achieved that this time around. That being the fact that, building on what Paven was talking about with regards to revamping critical areas of the protocol, making sure that they're extensible, they're modularized, and the fact that developers now can actually use those components to build on top of. And so that being said, even onboarding our own developers has become a lot more easier. We've expanded the team in that perspective, and have the capability of building applications on top very easily, as well as have the ability extending our transactions and creating a lot more types of transactions within our network.
Got it. Well, Aly, let's talk about that. Obviously, your SDK has consistently been improving over time for both enterprise and for the devs who want to start doing their own applications on your ecosystem. So how is everything building with regard to your SDKs so that there's this suite of options for both those parties to really start to showcase what your protocol can do? And how is the pipeline of applications going?
So the SDK has actually gone really well. We've launched the first version of it currently, and we built a custom Dapp on top of that. The Dapp was, and we did this internally. We built a domain naming service on top that allows you to kind of give, basically send tokens to a domain, and allows you to buy and sell domains within our network.
Okay.
That will be part of our release process when we're coming up on the wallet. Something else that Paven alluded to was the TPS numbers. The TPS numbers that we were looking at with regards to these types of applications, taking into consideration the application layer, the transactional layer, and the consensus protocol. The consensus layer. Altogether, we've had upwards of 4,000 TPS. And that was with, what was the throughput there? We're doing 100,000 transactions?
Yeah.
Yeah, at 100,000 transactions. So it was going really, really well on our network. If you monitored our Explorer, you would have seen our Explorer just flying across, right? And the reason was because we were spamming the network like crazy. Yeah. And we're making sure that, we did our due diligence when it came to load testing.
Yeah.
Got it. And Paven, I wanted to talk to you about the TPS, because a lot of people in blockchain research, they understand that we don't need millions of transactions per second. It's just a completely superfluous sort of ambition. But as Aly's saying, 4,000, that's moving towards the kind of scalability that you need to be effective, to be efficient, and to be global. What's the ambition with regard to the TPS in concert with all the other technicalities, with all the other aspects you need to build in to make this work?
So essentially the TPS, here's the thing. So the TPS of 4,000, first to start off by answering your question, is just with our main chain. If we combine side chains, it's actually 4,000 into each chain, which is essentially makes us, infinitely scalable, right? So that's the best thing about it. But the TPS testing that we've done is with our main chain. So the reason for actually doing a TPS testing is to make sure that, when we actually open up after the mainnet, right? So I'm sure that we're going to expect a traffic in terms of at least hundreds of thousands of transactions. Right. So we want to make sure that we actually deliver the promise that is promised by us. Basically, we need to make sure that we deliver our promise. For that, general TPS in the industry, if you go with proof of work, the TPS was around, for Ethereum, it was around 100, 200, and for Bitcoin, it's very less. It's even more or less you all know that. So we are also experimenting with the POS systems, right? So when we go with POS network, we need to make sure that we deliver a benchmark for the industry to follow, number one, and number two, we are not bloating it up anything, and it's proper 4,000.
We're not embellishing on the number, right? Yeah.
Right. So, and we can see that gives us sort of confidence that we can deliver our promise, right? So,
and Pav, what I want to talk about is the sidechain element. You both mentioned this infinite capacity, because we're talking about just one single node. We're talking about that main chain capacity of 4,000. Now that will be replicated throughout as you build this sidechain ecosystem. So, in the context of what you're actually trying to do, fundamentally, what does it actually mean to be able to expand at this rate? Because that's a really significant asset that you have with your sidechain development.
Are you talking in terms of TPS?
Yes, specifically in TPS, because obviously when we're talking about enterprise, they're going to demand significant scalability capacity. And obviously for those who want to interact with your ecosystem as developers or even users. So this is a big deal for you because of that ability to replicate from that main chain capacity in the sidechain sort of way of thinking.
Yeah. So sorry, could you repeat the question? Sorry, I forgot the question.
The question's more about what it can actually translate to in the real world. What does this mean? The fact that you can have this infinite capacity to move beyond the main chain, replicate that capacity into the side chains, and do it on an infinite scale. That's a big deal for what OneLedger can do both now and the future.
I'll give you a use case. Think about our sidechain for Ethereum. Okay, so you are bombarded with a lot of transactions coming up, and then at some point the sidechain is going to give up.
Right.
Because generally, if you say the 4,000 as a TPS, the moment it crosses, let's say for example, it gives up. That's where if you can spin up another version of a sidechain, just for Ethereum again, that's where it guarantees the reliability of the transaction. So make sure that everyone, whatever the transaction that they give, doesn't matter, they get the result as such at the end. So this is a direction. So when you talk about traditional web, not blockchain as such, the traditional web runs on factors like reliability, scalability, and all those stuff. So blockchain is at some distance from it for sure, but we are making steps in the direction. So the moment we make sure that this kind of infinite scalability is possible, that opens up a possibility of a lot of Dapps being developed on the chain. And now And all of a sudden you see possibilities of new sorts of dApps being opening up on the chain, which in turn meaning that an average user or a common man can actually use those dApps, and that's an adoption of blockchain as such at the end. Right? So each and every metric that we're talking about is one small baby step towards the direction of making blockchain, adoption to masses, right?
So if I could just summarize, like it's more on the load management side, right? So making sure that the traffic that's coming towards our blockchain can be the load can be managed by spinning up, like you said, new chains, but simultaneously giving our main chain a little bit of relief. Right? That way, we're not getting a bunch of transactions to our main chain. We can actually offload that to the side chain that it actually needs to go to.
Right. So essentially, really, you're optimizing the whole system that you have by reducing some of that central pressure on that main chain. But what does that mean, Aly, for business? What does it mean by having this whole ecosystem of the side chains for attracting more business into the ecosystem that is OneLedger?
So we've concepted a couple of things out with regards to having businesses run their own side chains, right? So if you want to be on the public ledger, you could host your own side chain that is connected to Ethereum, connected to Bitcoin, connected to any other coin that we're supporting, right? And build dApps on top of that or applications on top of that. And simultaneously, you could do the same thing on the private side, right? You could hook in as a private network that's a side chain that can then interconnect back into the public network via the main chain. So there's a bunch of concepts that we've come up with regards to that sort of a flow.
Right. And what about in terms of those mainstream blockchain and DLT systems we see emerge now? What's the process for OneLedger to decide whether or not they'll integrate and support those specific blockchains? There must be some sort of process internally to help you decide as a team which you will support, which you regard as good.
A lot of that has to do with our marketing team.
Right. Okay.
Sorry. So I should there's two things, right? Yeah. One is the simplicity of the adoption, right?
Okay.
So when we start doing Ethereum and Bitcoin, you immediately know that there's certain blockchains that you can automatically do because you're supporting Ethereum and Bitcoin. Any of the ones that spawned off of that.
Right.
Right. That's one.
And then again, I want to emphasize the point that we are trying to build sort of an interface that can actually make it possible for any blockchain to be connected, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
with Ethereum, those are the most used and complicated chains as well with respect to their proof of work, their proof of stake, penalties differ. So if we can solve those two as the main things, we can solve like maybe 99.99% of the cases there. Yeah. So that's where it's not just building the infrastructure or building the code and all those stuffs for the sidechain. It's also about building an interface that that we are trying to promote as a standard for actually connecting interoperability as such.
Yeah. Right, and clearly you're blockchain agnostic in that sense, because you want to build out a very robust global network. In that respect, Web 3.0, there's a lot of conversation happening right now, Aly and Paven, you would both know about this, especially with regard to connectivity in the enterprise and business sector. How are you involved in that?
So our conversations are more been along the lines of how to do the IoT devices into blockchain, those pertaining specifically to supply chain, right? So when you're thinking about temperature gauges, when you're thinking about tracking and monitoring activity of goods or transportation of goods, things like that, and that's where we're seeing the connectivity come in right now. I'm sure that it will scale into in-home and everywhere else. If you're in Canada, there's a particular industry that we've legalized recently.
Right. I have noticed and heard about that.
That could actually benefit a lot from such sort of monitoring, right? And tracking of where those goods are actually being grown, where they're being distributed to, and the entire life cycle. So, I mean, there are a lot of those type of use cases that we're engaging in now. Okay, well, let's explore this a bit more. So, you alluded to the value of tracking and traceability and transparency, all great points for blockchain. Now, supply chains, transport. Let's talk about those verticals for a moment. Let's expand the conversation of what OneLedger is really doing. Aly, you know a lot that you're not telling us. What can you tell us about some of these things that are happening? I mean, I can tell you from a partnership perspective, if you want to go there, with regards to, we've partnered with Blockchain and Transportation Alliance. This is a core organization that's actually looking at being able to set up the specifications of what blockchain means in transport and freight. And our efforts there are going to be along the lines of helping set those standards and helping the companies that are involved be able to adopt blockchain. And so that's kind of where we're at on that front. And I can't remember the rest of the question.
Oh, well, that was more the point, is the fact that, you know, you're engaging in supply chain or transport sort of verticals. Now, in whereabouts in the world are you starting with, Aly? Obviously, parts of the West are key.
Right now it's US and Canada. We've actually recently brought on a business development person that's looking at specifically in Canada in food and beverage industry. They're looking, as I mentioned, in the newly legalized industry of cannabis.
Yes, and I think it's legitimate. I mean, if it's legalized, I think it's very, you know, it's a reasonable thing to broach, because even in my country, in Australia, there's all these considerations happening. So it's legitimate that there be services and products and protocols even that support the tracking of these.
Exactly. And so, those that sort of moving into those industries is two-phased, right? It's one, giving a traceability of goods to the actual supply chain, but it's also giving audit transparency to government, right? So when government's looking at compliance issues and things like that, and that's something else that we're exploring, and that biz dev person is also exploring that, is with regards to, like, how do these benefit the government? How is the government, the Canadian government specifically, giving grants with regards to audit and traceability for products like this?
Right, and we have to talk about that in that respect. As soon as you broach government, we need to explore this. Now, in Canada, it's very pro-blockchain. It's very clear that that's the case. They set up certain entities to support that. The US is really moving towards regulation. Now we see that. So in that respect, whether that be an application that's going to interact with the government or you directly, what do you see as the potential for something like OneLedger to be one of those leading startups that really bridge that government to blockchain gap?
I think the potential is enormous, because yes, we do have plenty of different blockchain companies in Toronto and in Canada that are approaching it. But I mean, we're just on the brink of beginning these type of these type of applications for government. And I think that it's basically a blue ocean right now. They've done certain POCs, but nothing has gone past that. I think that it's very, very ripe for the taking for OneLedger.
Right, so on the brink of a boom, possibly, not to FOMO, but clearly we're still so nascent globally with regard to what this technology can do. Now, Paven, I wanted to ask you about the updates with the wallet itself. In terms of access, that's one of the most fundamental things for users. How is everything going on that front?
So we have built, before wallet, we built a wallet. I would like to give some of the components. Wallet works in conjunction with our SDK, a wallet that we built. Wallet is for storing keys. And if you talk about interoperability, it can store keys for Ethereum or Bitcoin or all those stuffs as well. So at your client side, basically in the mobile app or in the Chrome extension, the wallet that we're building. So that would be one thing. And then we are also we also have, doing so. We're almost we are almost done, close to accomplishing our wallet as such. So we have divided wallet into phases, right? Phase one of the wallet is essentially the wallet where people can transfer our currency and play with our domain naming service and that Aly just spoke about, and those things. And there's a phase two of the wallet, which is actually dealing with interoperability, where so our wallet, we want to just make sure that users have the best experience of it. Just with one click of a button, they should be interoperability should be seamless to them. Right. So all the complexity should be hidden from them. So that's where all this SDK, where it interacts with with our protocol, or even the vault that we're building, everything comes into play here. So yeah, I would say those are the phases that our wallet has, and the phase one is almost close to completion yet.
The third one is the Dapps integration.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Right. Well, right. So DApp integration is another feature. I wanted to talk to you about access. Now, we talk about the West. We're privileged with having, many of us having phones, having computers, that sort of thing. Now, for those who aren't as fortunate around the world, how are you really making sure that they can access the benefits of OneLedger?
So hold on. So I want to address a couple of things on that one. When you say, in developing nations, there is lack of access, and I think the primary access is not on the computer based. Primary access in the developing world is generally phone based, and I know this from East Africa. I've visited several times. They were well ahead of us when it came to mobile payment. Right, they were doing it via SMS. Right, and that, which was brilliant. And so I think from that perspective, the mobile applications actually will prevail with regards to adoption in those regions. The way we're building the wallet, though, we're building the wallet on a platform called Electron. And Electron is platform independent. And that's the reason why we chose that. Okay. So what that means is when we do go to market with our wallet, we'll probably initially go with something like a Chrome extension interface. But eventually we have the ability to scale cross environment, cross platform. And to one more point to that, we will be starting beta testing for the wallet in this month. And we will be actually reaching out to our community over the course of the month to kind of get them to get them onboarded to start using the application.
Right, and obviously the process of getting feedback through the development of this wallet will be key. And what I like about what you've said, Ali, is that you really are focusing on the reality that many people do have a phone now in developing regions, and you're going to be able to enable people to participate in those regions. So really this can be global quite rapidly once these things are tweaked, once the wallet's sorted, and once things get out into that environment.
And from a technical perspective, I just want to add to what Ali said. So we have clearly laid out the separation. We have a vault that can store the keys. We have an SDK that can interact with our protocol. So when it comes to the usability of a wallet as such, it's just the UI layer. It's just the skin on top of the UI layer. So you can make a Chrome extension, you can build an app, you can build maybe an SMS application as well. So we never know. I mean, so all those things are like, just those things doesn't have to deal with any complexity of the blockchain as such. These problems are something that world has already dealt with, and they know the best way to do with it.
Right. Okay.
And taking our interoperability to every layer within our tech stack, right? So if you're thinking about, having the Lynx engine be functional at the protocol layer, but simultaneously having the vault manage multiple sets of keys, having the SDK being able to translate different transactions across different networks. We've taken that interoperability and built it in every single module that we're moving forward with.
Right, and you talked about modularized approach before. How important is it to build the stack in this way? What's the advantage of taking the modularized approach?
I think it's super important, because what people can do is, rather than having to worry about building a vault to store keys, rather than having them worry about building an SDK to integrate into the RPC layer of the protocol, all of those things they can actually just adopt from OneLedger, build it into their application or connect to their application very easily, rather than having to build from scratch.
As I said before, right? We need to help mass adoption of blockchain. The only way it's gonna happen is through a nice user experience based Dapps. When the internet exploded in the same way, those Dapps were nothing but websites there, right? So the internet exploded. The Web 2.0 that we're talking about, or Web 1.0.
Right, so, and Paven, how important is it to have the Lynx engine built into this? I mean, obviously that's a core part of what drives all of this stack.
Yeah. I mean, it opens up a new world of possibilities. That's what I can say. I mean, it's complex. It's not something very easy to do. We are facing a lot of technical challenges in that. I'm being very honest with you. So there is, but then we are moving a step in the right direction. So we are unblocking each challenge one at a time, and then we're moving forward. So my only view of that is it opens up new doors, right? So a new way of new Dapps, or a new way of looking at blockchain itself.
Right. And what does it mean also, Pavan, to have your own virtual machine? I mean, that's a significant asset that you really can't, many startups can't say, they can't attest to that. You are building that. So what does it mean for OneLedger?
You're talking with regards to OLVM?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so that is our JavaScript-based smart contract engine, right? So yeah, so we've got one version of it right now. It is we have, since I said that, we have revamped our entire protocol. So the OLVM is not revamped yet completely. The process is going on. So the other part of the transaction, sending transaction, is all done. So we want to make sure that it can adapt to complex JavaScript smart contracts. So there is some testing being done in that side as well. We are coming up with our own complex smart contracts and trying to see how that runs and all. And there is a whole aspect of security to it, which we are also thinking about when we are doing that revamp because this is a big thing for us. Making sure people writing smart contracts in JavaScript, which is like very, very popular language, right? So it just makes their life a lot easier. So a lot of developers can actually build on top of it, which also means it's more responsibility for us.
Right. And that's what I wanted to hear from you. What I really like hearing from both of you is that you are continually developing the technology. You're making sure, most importantly, the smart contracts are open to more developers. And by having this system, like you said, with Java, it's such a common language utilized globally. This just means more access for those parties, and also, more relevance for OneLedger globally as well. So it is great to know, and I really appreciate your transparency when you talk about building. You're not saying built in every response, and that's the reality with this, is that it's an ongoing process. Now, with regard to use cases, can we talk to you, Ali, for a moment? We've talked about these in the past with areas like supply chain, like real estate, like B2B marketplaces, but give us a bit more clarity, more specifics with regard to use case, more examples.
So with regards to real estate, right? So there's several functions around the real estate that can be adopted by blockchain, right? So the entire escrow service with regards to lawyers and the dealings with your bank with regards to having a mortgage and lending, having the deed transfer or the title transfer. All of these processes kind of can work with a blockchain. Now, I'm not saying that we have the ability to solve the universal real estate case. We're going to have to walk in through the door with one of these use cases, and we're working with the team in Toronto, or will be working very soon with a team in Toronto with regards to the real estate projects. And what they want to do is take each and every one of these use cases and kind of adopt them towards blockchain. Their idea is to eliminate things like real estate agents. Unfortunately, there's a lot of weight that relies on other third parties within the process that you can start kind of eliminating and making the process a lot more cost efficient for the buyer and the seller. Because ideally what you want to do is be able to say, hey, here's my property. The seller says, I want to buy this, and make that transaction, right? Now you have all these other third parties. How do you automate that entire function with regards to, like I mentioned, mortgage lending, with regards to the escrow service for down payments, things like that. And so those are the things that we're going to start identifying, and how that translates directly to blockchain. And it's not just blockchain, like obviously it's IPFS. We'd be integrating with systems like that where we have a decentralized document management system where we can manage these documents.
Right, and I think that's a really good point, is that you do go beyond blockchain itself in terms of the capacity of OneLedger.
Yeah, the good thing about all these use cases that Ali was mentioning was, whenever we are coming across a use case, we are noting down the components in that involved, and we are also trying to figure out what are those components which has the most need in the industry as such, so that we can build them out and then sell that as a separate thing.
Right.
Yeah. So what he's alluding to is things like the escrow service, right?
Right.
It's not just for real estate. It can be reused in other aspects. We came across the same thing on supply chain, right? There's a process around putting your funds in escrow with regards to getting sorry, getting your paperwork from your banks, having that paperwork then sent over to the retailer's bank. So if you're the manufacturer, you need to send it to the retailer's bank. How does all of that get conducted? How does a paperwork get propagated over? How does it get propagated over to the port of authority, then to the shipper, from the shipping yards to the end buyer of the goods? Like all of those things actually have the same processes. So we're trying to identify them. We're trying to make sure that we generalize them to the point where we can actually reuse the same components across the board. Got
it. Now, a lot of businesses would not be aware of the benefits of OneLedger or a blockchain or a DLT or even some of the other aspects of the way in which these integrate. What's being done, guys, to really make sure and bring awareness to that sector so that they start knocking on your door, so that the pipeline starts to really grow? Because the real asset is that they can save money.
I like the fact that you asked that. I mean, to us, that's on a marketing front, to tell you the truth. And what we did was we just recently relaunched our website. We relaunched it on HubSpot. So we're looking at marketing automation online. We're looking at how we do search engine optimization, right? Making sure that we show up when it comes down to searching things like blockchain as blockchain for supply chain, blockchain for business, and so on. A lot of it has to do with content management. So making sure that we have the right amount of content that's being delivered in the right formats where it's being consumed by supply chain managers and so on. So there's a lot of work going into the marketing side of things and the marketing automation side of things that we're doing in the background as well.
Right, and that's really good to hear, because what I'm hearing from you, Aly, is that you're focusing on the mainstream sort of audience, those who actually really going to benefit from this, not just the crypto sphere itself and those in this group that could develop or build an app, but really bridging this gap of awareness. And I think that's going to be key for the next few years, is really trying to showcase what this can do for those parties, those sectors, those enterprises that literally don't know anything about OneLedger yet. Now, marketing's obviously built into your roadmap. So is the mainnet. Talk us through that. And when's that going to unfurl?
So at the end of the month, we will be releasing aspects of the roadmap and how we're going to get there. I don't think I'm allowed to say more than that. Especially,
nice save. But it is coming.
Except for the fact that mainnet will be Q4. But the roadmap, once it's released, it'll kind of identify a lot of those different components with regards to how we're getting there.
Got it. Now, one of the exciting things you're doing now, as I understand, is you're building staking in. And now that is something that a lot of different projects are doing. It adds another layer of value in. Are you doing that? And if you are, tell us more about it.
We actually have we're publishing a paper that should be will be published by the time this video is released.
Okay, that's good to know.
And Paven can highlight some of those things.
Sure.
Yeah, so we have put roughly like around 50-60 hours of collective effort, sitting down, brainstorming, writing all the questions down for staking, what matters and what is important, how to properly appreciate and avoid the good behavior versus bad behavior and all those things. Right. And so we have come up with a paper now. I mean, as Aly said, by the time this release will be there with a paper. So that paper is essentially having a lot of details around it. I can go into some specifics if you ask me, but yeah.
Well, you know what, Pav, I'll be like everybody else. I will wait until it's published, but I did want to ask you just generally, more the why. Why did you choose to do the staking element? What does it really do for an ecosystem like OneLedger?
At the end of the day, we have we have a public blockchain commitment as well, right? So the mainnet. And we need to make sure that our OLT token holders has some utility to the token.
Yes. Right. What about security though? I mean, surely that adds another layer of security by having staking built in.
Yes. Well, I really can't comment about security right now, but it's definitely an incentive for for the community to build, for whoever has some OLT to actually benefit from that, or maybe.
I can read between the lines, Paven. You're not going to be able to disclose too much, but obviously all that information is coming, and make sure you do check that out when it is released. I'm assuming also that incentivization information, all that will be included.
Yep. Right.
Okay, great. Now, let's move across to a more challenging topic, and that is the token itself. You've been on exchanges for some time now, and you've been still very assiduously building, making sure the team's working hard to construct more of what OneLedger is. You're on a few different exchanges right now. The price itself, I do want to talk about this, and I know you guys can't sort of talk too much to it because you're focused more on the building of your technology. But the reality is that it's dropped over time, and the price of this token is starting to really lift recently. So I wanted to sort of pose the question of why. Because it seems like now OneLedger's getting more media, it's getting more attention, people are talking more about OneLedger. What's going on, guys?
I think, again, I credit that to really good marketing.
Okay, right.
And obviously the project work is there, right? So we're definitely doing a lot of work with regards to building the protocol, with regards to making sure that the community is satisfied with our product. And so we're trying to move forward with that. And simultaneously, as we're doing that, we're marketing that stuff, right? We're marketing on Twitter, we're marketing on Telegram, we're marketing on Reddit. We're in every space that we can be for the community to identify us as a project that they would want to invest in.
Got it. Okay, so you're really starting to pick up your game with marketing. That's clear. Now, another tough question, probably can't answer it, but what's the likelihood of you going to other exchanges? Right now, I've made a list of a few: Hotbit, KuCoin, IDEX. They're just a few of the ones on your list. Liquidity is not really an issue, but something that could be significantly improved in the future. So other exchanges would help that. Are you considering, are you conversing with other exchanges? What's the plan?
So I know that's a big question, and you're right. It would be very, very hard for us to answer it, but we are definitely considering looking at other exchanges, and we are trying to approach them. As far as when and where we will onboard a new exchange, that's yet to be determined.
Got it. Now, I would just put a little, I guess, a little addition in there and say that really the likelihood of this is in the future, because liquidity is something that is imperative for all projects. So fingers crossed that there is more. For those who are supporters of OneLedger, I literally would, I would bet on it myself that there will be more to come, but it's up to the exchanges in the end, really.
For sure.
Right. Okay. That's good to know. Now, partnerships, guys, I really want to talk about some that were announced recently. One of them was Shift. Another one is the Google Marketplace. Do you want to comment on either of them and what it means for OneLedger?
With Shift, I think I reached out to them back in December of 2018, and that's when we started having a few conversations around like, what would a partnership really look like? And with them, and this is on the ideation side still, to tell you the truth. One of the things that would be super important for us is onboarding Shift as an interoperable chain, specifically leveraging them for identity management. Right? If we have and our main premise here is to have the capability of, or offload the capability of identity management onto a network like Shift, and be able to leverage it with any of our customers. That way they're coming through OneLedger and being able to connect through the identity management portal with Shift. And that's really where we see the big fit.
Okay, nice save there though with the ideation phase. I want to dig deep into that though. I mean, clearly you're having conversations with them. So can it move beyond the idea? Is it likely that this kind of partnership that Shift and OneLedger could do could really come to the fore?
I don't see why not. I do know that Shift is super focused right now on getting their mainnet out, getting their token out, doing that sort of work. But once they're up and running, I don't see why not. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're not just talking to them right now?
No, we totally are.
That's what
we're totally talking to them, but the problem is, I mean, not the problem. They have an objective. They have an objective right now, and so do we, right? So the thing is that the idea is we will approach them more aggressively, I would say, once they're up and running.
Got it. And Aly, I like your confidence as well. I mean, clearly, your objective is to really make sure that there's more conversations had with you and Shift once you both build this first iteration of technology out and that both have their mainnets out. With regard to the Google, let's talk about that, Pav. I want to know more about what's going on there.
So is it to me?
You want me to answer it? I can
Either of you. I mean, it's just an interesting sort of discussion right now with regard to partnerships.
Yeah.
So basically, the way what we're looking at for the Google Cloud Platform is we're trying to get an image of our server up and running on their marketplace. It's specifically just to have the capability of having developers run a node on Chronos using GCP with a one-click deployment, not worried about all the other issues around downloading our code, running their own server environment, things like that. It's trying to make it very, very easy for our development community to get started, and even for our validators, right? Our validators will have the capability of just hosting their node and getting basically a bill in the mail from Google, right? Free service that we're running on our end. Obviously, there's costs associated on Google's side for running the server node, but yeah, we want to be able to easily have more people start running our full nodes.
Yeah. And what could that mean, given that Google is one of the largest centralized tech platforms on the planet? What could that mean for OneLedger, quite realistically?
I think a lot of exposure for OneLedger, and being able to say that, we are basically everywhere in the world now, right? Anybody in any section anybody in any region can easily run our nodes effortlessly, essentially.
Right, and we've seen with the development of LibreCoin with Facebook, we've seen the value of attention alone that it's brought and shed light on for blockchain and cryptocurrency, and for startups like yourselves even. So clearly, you must be excited about the potentials of this Google Marketplace.
Yeah, we definitely.
Right.
We're definitely.
Are there any other alliances or enterprise sort of partnerships that you wanted to disclose, or that you're able to mention now, that are adding more to the flavor of OneLedger, adding more to the mix of the partnerships?
Yeah, no, for the time being, I think right now we're going to be tight-lipped about everything else.
Okay.
But
right.
I think we mentioned the Beta, GCP, Shift. Those are pretty dominant ones.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, Paven. Thank you for your information, your technological savvy, everything you're doing with regard to the software. Aly, as always, thank you for all your insights as Director of Products. It's been great to learn more about what you're really doing. Hopefully I've tried to bring forth the fact that OneLedger is trying to be a serious player in this game. It's not just, a transient, plan. They have a long-term vision. They want to be a serious competitor when it comes to enterprise, integrating DLT into that sort of the environment. And they're doing that their own way, and they're taking their time to do it, but they're also starting to move right now. Clearly, there's a lot of discussion had. Clearly, the marketing is moving, but most importantly, the technology is matching with enterprise need. So, gentlemen, I wish you all the very best as you continue to develop. I like hearing that it's all about the consistent development, not just simply that you're focused on things you've done in the past. Keep going with that. I wish you all the very best. And hopefully we'll catch up soon to learn more about what OneLedger is doing.
Yeah. Thanks for hosting us, Brad.
Yeah, thank you very much.